Have you ever trusted someone so deeply, only to feel your heart break in a single moment? On the night before her wedding, the bride caught her bridesmaid secretly sending love letters to her groom. But that was only the beginning. Because what happened next would shock everyone at the wedding, and when her ex appeared, the truth no one expected came out. Stay with this story, and don't forget to subscribe to hear more secrets behind weddings like this one. The bride was young, her heart wrapped in hope, and her hands busy with endless little details that made the wedding feel like a dream come true. She walked through boutiques, picking flowers, fabrics, and favors, every choice carrying the weight of her future. Each smile she gave seemed to light up her world, and every whispered promise from her groom felt like destiny itself. Friends and family admired how perfectly they fit, a love story that looked like it had been written in the stars. And standing closest to her, always smiling, always ready to help, was her bridesmaid. To everyone watching, they were inseparable, the bride and her best friend, bound together by years of loyalty and trust. No one could have imagined that beneath this flawless surface, something else was stirring quietly. Something the bride, in her joy, couldn't see yet. She filled her days with plans, her evenings with lists, and her nights with laughter shared with those she loved. Every ribbon tied, every dress tried on, seemed to bring her closer to the happiest moment of her life. She believed she had everything: love, friendship, and the promise of forever. Her groom was the kind of man who drew attention in every room, with charm that made people smile, and a gentleness that made her believe she was safe in his arms. The bridesmaid, her constant companion, seemed just as invested, pouring herself into helping the bride build this perfect picture. There was no reason to doubt her, no reason to wonder if her loyalty had cracks. Yet, life has a way of hiding truths until the very moment they can do the most damage. The closer the wedding came, the more the bride found herself overwhelmed by the beauty of what was unfolding. The guest list was full, the hall was reserved, and the future felt certain. Her parents praised her for finding such a kind man, her friends envied her for the fairy tale unfolding before their eyes. And in the center of it all, the bridesmaid stood, playing her role flawlessly, a picture of devotion. They laughed over cake tastings, cried happy tears over the gown, and dreamed about the life waiting beyond that altar. It all seemed unshakable, a tower built of love and trust. But even the strongest towers can hide cracks within their walls. Cracks that spread quietly, until the whole thing threatens to fall. The bride often thought back to when she and her bridesmaid first met, how natural their bond had been, how safe she felt sharing her secrets. She trusted her not only with her plans, but with her heart, her doubts, her deepest fears. And when the bridesmaid promised that she would always be there, the bride believed it without question. She never thought that someone so close could be capable of hiding something so dangerous. She never thought love itself could become a weapon. But the truth is, betrayal doesn't come from strangers, it comes from the ones closest, the ones we never suspect. And that truth was about to rise like a storm cloud on the horizon of her perfect day. Her groom often joked about how lucky he was to be marrying not just her, but gaining her circle of friends as well. He admired the closeness she shared with her bridesmaid, often saying he was glad she had someone who truly understood her. Those words warmed her heart, made her feel even more secure in the love surrounding her. She wanted to believe the world had finally aligned in her favor. Every sign pointed toward happiness, every detail seemed proof that love had chosen her. But the truth is, happiness can sometimes be the brightest mask of all. And behind that mask, things were already shifting. Late at night, when the bride lay awake imagining her future, she never once considered that danger could be creeping in so close. She thought about her vows, about holding his hands, about promising forever in front of everyone she loved. She thought about her bridesmaid standing proudly beside her, a symbol of support and loyalty. These visions gave her peace, they gave her comfort. But while she dreamed of loyalty, another story was being written in the shadows. One she didn't author, one she didn't even know existed. And yet, soon, it would crash through her world with a force that would shatter everything she believed in. On the surface, it was the kind of love story people envy, the kind they talk about at gatherings, smiling, saying, they're perfect for each other. The bride let those words sink into her, building her confidence, filling her with pride. She thought she had outwitted heartbreak, outlived the mistakes of the past, and found something solid. With her best friend by her side, she felt untouchable, safe, anchored. But life has a way of writing twists into the stories we think are certain. And hers was about to twist in a way that would change not only her wedding, but the rest of her life. Every time she looked at her bridesmaid, she saw a sister, a confidant, someone she believed was her greatest ally. She couldn't see the restlessness hidden in her eyes, couldn't hear the words left unsaid. If she had looked closer, she might have noticed the way glances lingered too long, or the way silence seemed heavier at times. But love and trust make us blind to danger. They keep us wrapped in comfort, unaware of the storm forming just outside the window. And that storm was closer than she thought. Her laughter echoed through those final days of planning, and the air around her seemed filled with light. She told herself she was stepping into forever, hand in hand with the man she loved, guarded by the friend she trusted most. But perfection is fragile, and joy can turn sharp in an instant. She had no idea that her most trusted companion was already moving in the dark, already making choices that would slice through her heart. She believed her life was unfolding into a fairy tale, unaware that soon, reality would write itself in darker ink. She thought her best friend was her greatest support, but that night, everything changed. The night before the wedding was supposed to be calm, filled with dreams of walking down the aisle, but sleep refused to come. The bride tossed and turned, her heart restless, her mind playing scenes of the big day over and over. She decided to walk through the quiet hall, hoping a moment of silence would ease her nerves. The house was dimly lit, shadows stretching across the floor, carrying a strange stillness in the air. And that's when she saw it, her bridesmaid, standing near the groom's door, clutching something in her hand. The bride froze, confusion tightening her chest, unsure why her closest friend would be there so late at night. The bridesmaid glanced around nervously, unaware she was being watched. Then, carefully, almost tenderly, she bent down and slid an envelope under the groom's door. The motion was quick but deliberate, too intimate to be explained as something ordinary. The bride's breath caught in her throat, her body refusing to move. Questions flooded her mind. What was in that envelope, and why did it feel so secretive? She pressed her back against the wall, hoping not to be seen, her pulse hammering in her ears. In that moment, the perfect picture of her wedding began to blur. When the bridesmaid walked away, the bride crept forward, her hands trembling as she reached for the envelope. It felt heavier than paper should, as if it carried the weight of betrayal inside. For a moment, she thought about leaving it untouched, convincing herself it was probably nothing. But curiosity pulled stronger than fear. She tore it open, her fingers stiff, her breath shallow. And there it was, a love letter, filled with words that pierced her like glass. Words that didn't belong to friendship, but to something forbidden, something dangerous. Her eyes scanned the letter, each sentence cutting deeper. The words were full of longing, affection, and confessions no bridesmaid should write to a groom. The handwriting was unmistakable, it was her best friend's. The bride felt the blood drain from her face, her stomach twisting violently as the world spun around her. She had trusted this woman with everything, and now, in a single moment, that trust was splintering. The page shook in her hands, the ink blurring as tears welled in her eyes. She wanted to scream, but silence held her captive. Her thoughts raced. Was this a mistake? A prank? A misunderstanding? But the emotions on the page were too raw, too personal to be anything but the truth. Memories of laughter, promises of loyalty, and years of friendship collided with the cruel reality in her hands. She clutched the letter tightly, wishing it would vanish, wishing she hadn't seen what she now knew. Every word written there whispered a betrayal that had been hidden in plain sight. And the worst part was knowing she was standing at the edge of something much darker. Fear mingled with anger, leaving her trembling in the hallway. She wanted to confront her bridesmaid immediately, demand answers, demand the truth. But a voice inside warned her, what if this was just the beginning? What if there was more than one letter? The thought sent chills down her spine, her blood running cold as the walls seemed to close in around her. The silence of the house was no longer comforting, it felt suffocating, pressing her to uncover what else had been kept from her. She held the letter against her chest, her heart beating like a drum. Suddenly, every moment between her groom and bridesmaid replayed in her mind, the glances, the laughter, the little moments she once dismissed as innocent. Were they signs she had ignored? Were they clues she had refused to see because love had blinded her? Each memory now felt poisoned, rewritten by the ink she held in her hands. And the weight of that truth crushed her. She wasn't just losing trust in her friend. She was losing trust in the man she was about to marry. The hallway felt colder, darker, as if the house itself had shifted with her discovery. The bride leaned against the wall, struggling to breathe, her body numb. She thought about the guests arriving, the vows she had prepared, the dreams she had carried so close to her heart. All of it now seemed fragile, built on a foundation she wasn't sure could hold. She wiped her tears, but they kept falling, unstoppable. Deep down, she knew this letter was not the end, it was the beginning of something much bigger. She clutched the letter one last time, unable to decide if she should destroy it or hide it as proof. Every choice seemed impossible, every thought drowned in pain. Her body shook as she returned to her room, clutching the secret that had already shattered her. She wanted to believe it was just this one letter, one slip, one mistake. But in her heart, she felt the storm building. This was only the first letter, and what she would discover next would explode her trust. The bride sat in her room for hours, staring at the letter, her mind spiraling. The words on the page were burned into her memory, yet part of her still wanted to believe there was an explanation. Maybe she was overreacting, maybe there was some truth she hadn't considered. But deep down, she knew she couldn't carry this secret alone. So when morning came, her hands trembling, she walked toward the groom's room, holding the letter like it was a weapon. Her heart raced as she knocked, unsure what kind of man would answer the door. He opened it with a smile, the kind of smile she once thought was full of love. But as soon as he saw the paper in her hands, the color drained from his face. His voice cracked as he asked what it was, and before he could make excuses, she held it up, demanding answers. Her words shook, her voice heavy with pain, but her resolve was firm. She had to know. The groom reached for the letter, but she pulled it back, her eyes locked on his. She wanted to hear the truth come from him. At first, he laughed nervously, brushing it off as a misunderstanding. "It's nothing," he said, "just a mistake." He claimed the bridesmaid had gotten too emotional, that it wasn't his fault, that he never encouraged her feelings. But the bride's heart wasn't convinced. His eyes betrayed him, shifting, darting, unable to meet hers. Each flicker of his gaze only confirmed the fear growing inside her. Something was wrong, something was hidden. And every word he spoke only deepened her humiliation. She wanted to believe him, desperately. After all, this was the man she had chosen, the man she had built her future around. But the letter in her hands told a story that didn't match his excuses. She thought about the bridesmaid, about the secrecy, about the timing. None of it added up. And with every denial, she felt more like a fool. It wasn't just betrayal she feared. It was the thought of being the last to know, of being the one everyone else pitied. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Why would she write this?" she whispered, her voice cracking. The groom hesitated, fumbling for words. He said it was all in her head, that she was letting nerves get the best of her. But that answer cut deeper, because it made her feel small, unstable, like her pain didn't matter. She realized he wasn't just lying, he was trying to twist her doubts into weakness. And that realization was far worse than the letter itself. Her hands trembled as she pressed the paper against his chest, watching his face for any flicker of honesty. Instead, he shrugged it off, muttering that it wasn't worth fighting about. That phrase echoed in her mind. It wasn't worth fighting about. Was their future not worth fighting for? Was her trust so fragile that he thought it could be dismissed with a few careless words? Her heart cracked under the weight of it. For the first time, she began to see the cracks in the man she thought she loved. The room felt smaller, suffocating. The bride felt like she was standing in quicksand, every breath dragging her deeper. She thought of the guests already preparing, the ceremony planned to perfection, the life she was supposed to step into. But now, every step forward felt like a lie. She looked at him, at the man who was supposed to be her protector, and all she saw was someone who didn't fight for her. Someone who wanted to sweep the truth under the rug and pretend nothing had happened. The humiliation burned hotter than the fear. What if others already knew? What if she was the last one clinging to an illusion of love? That thought cut her deeper than any letter could. Her mind screamed for clarity, for truth, but all she had were half-truths and empty denials. She realized that no matter what he said, the letter existed. The feelings behind it were real. And whether he admitted it or not, something was wrong. Something had already poisoned what they were about to build together. As she walked out of the room, her body numb, she felt more lost than ever. Her hand still clutched the letter, but her heart held 1,000 questions that had no answers. She doubted her instincts, doubted her worth, doubted the love she thought was unshakable. And just as she began to doubt herself, another secret was about to surface. The morning sun spilled across the room, but its warmth didn't reach the bride's heart. Her hands shook as she entered the groom's room, desperate for any clue that might explain the growing storm in her life. Every corner she glanced at seemed innocent, every object ordinary. Yet she couldn't ignore the knot in her stomach, the whisper of doubt that had been growing since last night. Her eyes fell on his suitcase, half-packed, waiting for their honeymoon. Something inside her whispered that the answers might be hidden there, tucked between his belongings, waiting to be discovered. Her fingers trembled as she unzipped the suitcase, her mind torn between hope and fear. Inside, neatly folded shirts and suits filled the space, the smell of cologne mixed with fabric softener. She rifled through each compartment, holding her breath, heart hammering, praying that she would find nothing. But then, tucked deep at the bottom, she found an envelope. The handwriting made her freeze, a sinking feeling settling in her chest. It wasn't the last letter, it was another one. And just holding it made her blood run cold. She pulled the letters out slowly, stacking them in her shaking hands. The first few were old, but others had been written just weeks ago, weeks before their wedding. Some spoke of longing, some of passion, some of promises that should have never existed. Each sentence she read felt like a knife twisting in her heart. The betrayal wasn't a mistake, it was a pattern. And the realization hit her with full force. This wasn't a single lapse, but a series of secret exchanges that had been hidden from her for months. Memories flashed across her mind, moments she had shared with the groom that now seemed staged or false. Little notes he had tucked into her gifts, whispered compliments, stolen glances, what had been genuine and what had been performance. She felt dizzy, like the floor had been pulled from beneath her feet. The suitcase, once an ordinary object, now represented the depth of deceit she hadn't imagined possible. Her heart ached, but she couldn't stop reading. She needed to know everything. Some letters were fiery, filled with passion and desire, written in ways that made it impossible to ignore their meaning. Others were tender, almost pleading, each one revealing a side of her groom she had never been allowed to see, or had been intentionally kept from seeing. Her hands shook as she sorted them, trying to make sense of the timeline, trying to understand the extent of what had been hidden. And with every word, the room felt colder, the air heavier, as if the house itself was holding its breath along with her. She thought about confronting him again, about demanding the truth, but fear stopped her. Fear of what she might hear, fear of how deep the betrayal went, fear of what others would think if the truth spilled before the ceremony. The letters painted a story that wasn't just about dishonesty, it was about betrayal wrapped in intimacy, a love that never included her. The gravity of it pressed down on her, pinning her thoughts to a single, painful focus. She had been deceived, and it was far worse than she had imagined. Her mind raced with questions. How could the bridesmaid, her best friend, play such a role in this web? How had she missed the signs, the small glances, the half-hidden smiles? How had someone she trusted so completely been capable of such secrecy? And most terrifying of all, what else was waiting to be discovered before the ceremony began? Each thought made her pulse quicken, each heartbeat reminding her that time was slipping, that every second brought her closer to facing the world in front of everyone she loved. The suitcase became a symbol of everything hidden, a Pandora's box that revealed betrayal she never expected. Her hands were trembling, her mind spinning, her vision blurred with tears she refused to shed. She realized the depth of deception wasn't just about letters, it was about manipulation, about lives entwined in ways she couldn't yet unravel. The morning sun that had promised warmth now seemed cruel, highlighting the cracks in the perfect life she thought she had built. And as she held the letters tightly, trying to steady herself, she felt the first hint of movement in the room outside. Footsteps approached, slow and deliberate, announcing someone else's presence. Her world was collapsing, but the truth was not complete yet. Someone else was about to arrive. The hall was alive with light and laughter, flowers cascading from every corner, and the music wrapping around the guests like a gentle embrace. Yet, behind her forced smile, the bride's heart felt hollow, as though each note of the piano cut through her chest. She walked down the aisle, her hands trembling slightly, gripping the bouquet with the strength of someone holding on to what little hope remained. The guests smiled, unaware of the storm inside her, believing this was the happiest day of her life. Her eyes kept searching, scanning the crowd for any sign that might offer comfort or understanding. But the bride found none, only the familiar faces of friends and family, cheering, clapping, oblivious to the betrayal she carried with her. The bridesmaid stood by the side, perfect in her dress, her posture proud, her eyes careful to hide anything unusual. Every detail around her screamed joy and celebration, yet inside, the bride felt as though she were walking through a carefully staged theater of lies. Her groom's smile was dazzling, as if nothing had changed, as if the letters and secrets she had discovered were mere illusions. He took her hand, the touch that once made her heart soar now sending a shiver of doubt down her spine. She felt humiliated, exposed, as though everyone could see her vulnerability hidden behind the layers of her dress and makeup. Every step toward the altar felt heavier than the last, each footfall carrying the weight of the truth she had uncovered. Guests whispered, exchanging smiles and glances of excitement, but to the bride, it all felt surreal. The room buzzed with anticipation for the vows, yet her mind raced, replaying every moment of betrayal she had uncovered. The letters, the hidden glances, the whispered excuses, none of it could be undone. She held her head high, forcing a calm expression, but inside, her emotions collided violently, leaving her breathless and on edge. She glanced at the bridesmaid once more, her best friend turned traitor, and felt a storm of anger, disappointment, and disbelief. How could someone she had trusted for years act so boldly, standing there with everyone watching, pretending nothing was wrong? The contrast between the smiling bridesmaid and the heartbreak in the bride's chest made the betrayal feel sharper, more profound. Every detail, from the carefully arranged flowers to the soft music, now seemed a cruel backdrop to her unraveling world. As she reached the altar, the bride tried to steady her breathing, forcing her mind to focus on something, anything, that could anchor her. She reminded herself that she was strong, that she had faced pain before, and that she could endure this moment. But the groom's casual charm, the bridesmaid's serene composure, and the smiling guests all felt like reminders of how alone she was in this truth. Every word of her vows threatened to falter, every step forward a test of her endurance. The officiant smiled, inviting her to speak, and she clenched her bouquet tightly, finding strength in the fragile flowers between her fingers. She looked at the groom, searching for a hint of honesty, a spark of the man she thought she knew. But his eyes were calm, almost rehearsed, as if this ceremony had been perfected for appearances alone. The room seemed to close in, music fading into the background as the tension in her chest mounted, each heartbeat a drum counting down the moment before revelation. Every guest waited, eager for the exchange of vows, but the bride felt the weight of a secret pressing against her ribs. She forced a smile at the crowd, her eyes flicking back to the bridesmaid one last time. Pride and betrayal intertwined in that glance, emotions too intense to fully comprehend. And just as she steadied herself to speak, a sudden movement caught her attention from the back of the hall. An unexpected voice rang out, cutting through the ceremony, freezing everyone in place. The room went silent, eyes turning toward the sound, hearts pounding in confusion and anticipation. And in that instant, the perfect image of the wedding shattered, leaving only shock and disbelief in its wake. But in the middle of the ceremony, an unexpected voice called out from the back. The bride's body froze, her breath caught in her chest, as her ex-boyfriend stepped slowly down the aisle. Time seemed to stretch, every second heavy with disbelief. He looked different, taller, more confident, the kind of presence that demanded attention, but those eyes, those familiar eyes still carried the tenderness she had once trusted. The room shifted as whispers rose, low murmurs rippling through the guests like waves of curiosity and shock. Hearts pounded, and the music seemed to pause, leaving a silence thick enough to choke on. He stopped a few feet away, his gaze locked on hers. The smile he once reserved only for her was gone, replaced by a seriousness that made her stomach twist. Everyone in the hall sensed the tension, leaning in with a mix of excitement and dread. The bride's mind raced, trying to make sense of his appearance. Had he come to apologize? To interrupt the ceremony? Or was this something far more significant, something she hadn't seen coming at all? The bridesmaid shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward him with a flash of unease. Even the groom, who had been projecting calm, faltered slightly, his confident smile cracking for a split second. The air felt electric, charged with unspoken questions. The guests exchanged nervous glances, trying to anticipate what would happen next. The bride's pulse hammered as she held herself still, every fiber of her being alert. Her wedding day had become a stage for revelation, a moment she hadn't imagined since their breakup. He opened his mouth, but no words came at first. The room held its collective breath, each heartbeat echoing the suspense. The bride's eyes narrowed slightly, emotions colliding, shock, fear, longing, and something she couldn't quite name. Memories of their past, laughing late nights, whispered secrets, promises they had made, flooded back. Yet now, in this public moment, those memories were tangled with doubt and anticipation. The weight of the moment pressed down on her chest, threatening to make her stumble. Slowly, he took a step closer, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. "I tried to warn you," he said, eyes searching hers for understanding. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that made the room shiver. Everyone turned to look, guests leaning forward in anticipation, sensing a story unfolding in real time. The bride's heart pounded, caught between relief and fear. Relief that someone cared enough to intervene, fear that the truth about her groom and bridesmaid would explode in a way she hadn't prepared for. His gaze swept over the groom, then the bridesmaid, and back to her. "I have proof of what's been happening," he continued, holding a small bundle in his hand. The bride's stomach dropped, her breath quickening. The bundle could only mean one thing: evidence, undeniable proof that would reveal every lie, every secret kept from her. The whispers in the room grew louder, rising into a crescendo of tension and anticipation. The ceremony that had promised joy now felt like a trial, with all eyes fixed on the unfolding drama. The groom's confident facade faltered completely, his jaw tightening as he realized the presence of evidence he could no longer ignore. The bridesmaid paled, her posture rigid, hands trembling slightly. The ex-boyfriend's calm authority contrasted sharply with their panic, creating a dynamic that left everyone on edge. The bride gripped her bouquet tightly, feeling the weight of years of trust and betrayal in a single moment. Her emotions surged, relief, fear, heartbreak, and a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, the truth could set her free. The room was silent, anticipation thick in the air as he stepped forward fully. "Everything you need to know is here," he said, lifting the evidence slightly, making sure she and the guests could see it. Time seemed to freeze, the sound of music, chatter, and even breathing fading away. All that remained was the tension of truth about to be revealed, hanging over the bride like a storm cloud. She could feel her knees weaken, her heart racing faster than ever before. And then, as he finally opened his mouth fully to speak, the words cut through the hall with devastating clarity. Gasps erupted, guests recoiling in shock, some covering their mouths, others frozen in disbelief. The bride's eyes widened as the reality hit her, the culmination of deceit and betrayal now unavoidable. When he opened his mouth, the shocking truth silenced the entire wedding. The bride's eyes were glued to her ex, her heart pounding in her chest, as he held the letters for all to see. The room felt impossibly silent, each guest leaning forward in anticipation, sensing the tension rise like a tide. She had never imagined a moment like this, where betrayal would be so vividly displayed before everyone she knew. Every word he had prepared to speak was carefully measured, meant to expose the truth without sensationalism, but the impact was immediate, undeniable. He spoke clearly, calmly, yet every syllable carried weight. "These letters are proof," he said, his voice steady despite the storm around them. "Proof that your groom and your bridesmaid have been exchanging love letters for months." He lifted them slightly, letting the paper edges catch the light so everyone could see the writing. The bride's stomach sank, her hands gripping her bouquet tighter, as the words finally transformed suspicion into undeniable reality. Gasps and murmurs swept through the room like wildfire. Friends and family exchanged shocked glances, unable to process the depth of deception. The bridesmaid's face went pale, her lips parting slightly as if searching for an excuse, for a word that could undo the damage. But none came. The groom's carefully constructed mask of charm and confidence crumbled, revealing the fear and guilt he had tried to hide. His eyes darted helplessly, searching for a way to regain control of the moment, but it was too late. The bride felt every emotion collide inside her, humiliation, anger, sorrow, disbelief. The betrayal she had sensed now had a form, a tangible proof she could not ignore. Her friends whispered behind her, offering sympathetic glances, while others stared openly, captivated by the unfolding drama. Her wedding, a day meant for joy and celebration, had transformed into a theater of truth. Every detail, the flowers, the music, the smiles of guests, now seemed like a backdrop to a story she never wanted to live. Her hands shook as she glanced at the bridesmaid, who had been her closest friend. How could someone so trusted betray her with such boldness, standing in plain sight, hiding in the guise of support and loyalty? The bridesmaid's composure faltered under the weight of exposure. A tear rolled down her cheek, but it did nothing to erase the evidence of deceit. The groom looked like a man unmasked, his previous confidence shattered into fragments scattered across the room like broken glass. The axe didn't stop with letters alone. He detailed moments he had witnessed, encounters he had intercepted, and subtle signs that had been carefully hidden from the bride. Every revelation landed like a hammer strike, leaving the audience stunned and the bride trembling. The layers of deceit peeled away with precision, revealing the full extent of betrayal. And with each sentence, the room grew heavier, the air thicker, the moment more impossible to endure. She wanted to speak, to confront, to scream, but words failed her. Her throat tightened, her breath shallow, as she realized the magnitude of what had been concealed. All at once, the puzzle of broken glances, whispered excuses, and late-night distractions clicked into place. The realization was devastating. This was not a mistake, not a fleeting lapse. It was a calculated web of lies designed to keep her blind until this very day. The guests were now fully absorbed in the drama, some whispering, some gasping audibly, unable to turn away. Every eye in the hall was on the trio, the bride frozen in shock, the groom crumbling under the weight of exposure, and the bridesmaid unable to hide her guilt. The bride's mind raced, trying to comprehend how someone she trusted implicitly could have woven such deception right under her nose. She felt betrayal like a living, breathing force pressing against her chest, making it hard to move, hard to think. And just when she thought the revelation had reached its peak, the ex's gaze met hers once more. "But what you don't know," he said softly, "is not everything. There's one more truth, one more thing I need to tell you." Her heart skipped a beat, the room holding its collective breath, every guest leaning forward in anticipation. The shock of the letters had stunned her, but his next words promised something even more unimaginable. But his confession did not end there. What he admitted next left her breathless. The bride's chest tightened as she listened, her mind racing to process the words she never expected to hear. The ex stood before her, calm yet full of intensity, explaining how his love had never faded. Even after the breakup, even after letting go, his heart had stayed with her. He hadn't interfered out of respect, or so he claimed, but watching her about to commit to someone unworthy broke him in ways he couldn't ignore. He stepped closer, careful not to invade her space, but close enough for his sincerity to be undeniable. "I never stopped loving you," he admitted, his voice quiet but unwavering. The word struck her, creating a storm of emotions she didn't know how to contain. Relief mingled with disbelief, confusion with longing, and hope with fear. Every heartbeat felt like a drum in her chest, echoing the weight of his confession. Guests murmured, sensing the intensity of the moment, but the bride felt the world narrow to the three of them, herself, the groom who had betrayed her, and the ex who stood as a witness to her pain. His eyes searched hers for understanding, for acknowledgement of what had been hidden in plain sight for so long. Every letter, every secret, every lie suddenly made sense in the light of his presence and honesty. The ex continued, explaining that he had stepped away only because he wanted her happiness, believing she deserved someone who could love her fully, even if that wasn't him. But seeing her ready to marry a man who had deceived her, who had manipulated her trust, made it impossible to remain silent. His arrival wasn't selfish, it was a last attempt to save her from a lifetime of heartache. His words carried a sincerity that the bride couldn't ignore, even as her mind struggled to reconcile the betrayal she had just uncovered. Every detail of their past, the moments she had cherished, the love she had thought she left behind, returned with vivid clarity. She remembered their laughter, the whispered conversations late at night, the shared dreams. And now, juxtaposed against the deceit of the groom and bridesmaid, those memories glowed with the warmth of truth. Her heart ached with the realization that she had almost overlooked the one person who had always cared for her genuinely. Her hands trembled slightly, clutching her bouquet, as she felt torn between two worlds. One was filled with lies, betrayal, and humiliation, embodied by the groom and his accomplice. The other was illuminated by love, honesty, and a devotion she had thought long gone. The choice was overwhelming, the pressure nearly unbearable. She realized that this moment would define not just her wedding day, but her entire future. The ex's eyes never left hers as he spoke, offering not pressure, but clarity. "I came not to disrupt, but to protect," he said softly, the weight of his words pressing on her heart. She felt her emotions unravel, caught between past love and present pain. The truth of his presence was undeniable. It cut through the haze of deceit like sunlight breaking through clouds. Every instinct screamed that he was right, that this was more than intervention, it was salvation. The bride's mind raced, her emotions a tempest of betrayal, confusion, and longing. She looked at her groom, the man she had almost given everything to, and felt the sting of broken trust, the weight of humiliation in front of all their guests. Then her gaze shifted to the ex, who had stood by silently, patiently, and now revealed the love that had never died. The choice she faced felt monumental, a life-altering decision that would forever change her story. And in that moment, as whispers filled the hall and hearts beat faster in anticipation, she understood the gravity of what was before her. The wedding that had promised celebration was now a crossroads of truth, loyalty, and love. The bride stood torn between betrayal, humiliation, and a confession she never expected, but the hardest decision was yet to come. Tears ran freely down the bride's cheeks as she turned to face the groom and bridesmaid, the weight of betrayal heavy on her shoulders. The hall fell silent, every guest frozen in shock, as the woman they had admired for her composure transformed into someone fierce and determined. The letters in her hand felt like a weapon, each word tearing apart the illusion of trust that had held her world together. Her voice shook, not from weakness, but from the intensity of emotion she could no longer contain. She lifted the letters, her fingers trembling, and let them fall to the floor one by one. Each paper fluttered like a confession in the wind, exposing every secret, every hidden betrayal. The room seemed to pulse with the energy of revelation, whispers and gasps rippling like waves through the guests. The bridesmaid's face drained of color, her confident composure crumbling with every shred of evidence revealed. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came, only the silent acknowledgement of guilt. The groom fell to his knees, hands outstretched, desperate to salvage what little dignity remained. "Please, it's not what it looks like," he pleaded, voice cracking under the weight of exposure. But the bride's eyes were unwavering, her decision resolute. His pleas bounced off the walls, hollow and ineffective against the reality of the truth she now held in her hands. The trust that had once bound them evaporated in an instant, leaving him exposed, powerless, and utterly defeated. The guests leaned forward, captivated by the drama unfolding before them. Some whispered in disbelief, others exchanged sympathetic glances with the bride, acknowledging the courage it took to confront such betrayal openly. The atmosphere was electric, charged with emotion, as every detail of the deception was laid bare. The bridesmaid's tears fell freely now, a silent confession of her own guilt, while the groom's trembling form revealed the total collapse of his carefully maintained facade. The bride's trembling voice finally broke the silence, sharp yet steady, as she spoke words that would echo in everyone's minds. "This wedding is over," she declared, her tone leaving no room for argument. The weight of her statement reverberated, each syllable carrying the force of years of misplaced trust and hidden lies. She felt a mix of liberation and sorrow, as if a chapter of her life had closed violently yet with purpose. She stepped back, letting the reality of the moment sink in for herself and everyone watching. The letters on the floor symbolized more than betrayal, they represented the choice she had to reclaim her life, her dignity, and her self-respect. The room was filled with a tense quiet, the kind that comes when truth burns brighter than ceremony. Even the guests, once eager for celebration, now understood the gravity of what had just occurred. The bridesmaid's sobs grew louder, echoing through the hall like an acknowledgement of all that had been hidden. The groom's face contorted with regret, but it was too late for apologies, too late for redemption. The bride's emotions surged, anger, sorrow, relief, all colliding into a moment of clarity. She realized that ending the wedding was not just an act of defiance, it was an act of liberation, a reclaiming of the life and love she truly deserved. As she lowered her gaze, she took a deep breath, feeling the burden of betrayal lifting slightly with each exhale. The guests watched, captivated, witnessing not only the collapse of lies but the rise of strength and self-respect. Her eyes scanned the room one last time, resting briefly on the groom and bridesmaid, now exposed and powerless. She felt the power of truth coursing through her, giving her the courage to face the next chapter of her life. And when she looked up, her eyes met the ex's, and in that gaze, she saw a reflection of loyalty, love, and the possibility of a new beginning. The shock of confrontation gave way to hope, the pain of betrayal softened by the promise of something genuine. A new chapter of her life was ready to unfold, one defined not by lies, but by trust, honesty, and real love. But when she looked into her ex's eyes, a new chapter of her life opened before her. Days later, the bride found herself standing in a quiet cafe, a place far from the chaos of the wedding hall. The air smelled faintly of coffee and pastries, ordinary yet comforting. Her heart was still tender, bruised from the whirlwind of betrayal and confrontation, but the pain felt lighter here. She wasn't running from her emotions anymore, she was facing them, one shaky step at a time, aware that healing could begin only when she embraced the truth. When her ex arrived, he walked with calm confidence, not rushing her, not imposing his presence, but offering the steady reassurance of someone who genuinely cared. Their eyes met, and in that gaze, she recognized a reflection of all the trust, love, and honesty she had almost forgotten. He didn't need to say much, his silence carried volumes. Words could not contain the depth of loyalty and understanding that radiated from him, and she felt a sense of relief she hadn't realized she was craving. They sat across from each other, the quiet hum of the cafe around them forming a protective bubble. She noticed small changes in him, slight wrinkles from time past, a more thoughtful smile, the way he observed her carefully without pressing her. Each gesture reminded her of his patience and respect, qualities the groom had never shown. Slowly, she felt the tension inside her ease, as if the universe itself was giving her permission to trust, to consider love again, cautiously but with hope. Memories of the past came rushing back, the laughter, the late-night conversations, the promises they once made. But this time, they were different. The past no longer held her hostage, it had transformed into a guide, a lesson in recognizing who truly valued her. She reflected on the betrayal she had endured, realizing that it was not only painful but necessary. It had forced her to see the difference between shallow affection and genuine, unwavering loyalty. Her ex reached across the table, lightly touching her hand, a simple gesture that spoke more than words ever could. She felt warmth spread through her, a reminder that true love wasn't flashy or dramatic, it was steady, respectful, and present. The scars on her heart were still there, reminders of the storm she had survived, but they no longer threatened to hold her back. Instead, they marked the resilience she had gained, the wisdom she now carried into the next chapter of her life. They talked quietly, about life, about choices, and about what really mattered. She listened more than she spoke, absorbing the honesty and authenticity he offered. Each word reassured her that not all love was deceptive, not all relationships were bound to betrayal. And for the first time since the wedding, she felt a sense of peace mingled with cautious excitement. Life was giving her a second chance, one she would not waste. As they walked outside, the sunlight caught her face, illuminating her expression of tentative hope. She realized that moving forward didn't mean forgetting the past, it meant learning from it, understanding it, and using it to choose wisely. She felt empowered, her heart no longer a prisoner of lies, but a compass guiding her toward truth and genuine connection. Every step she took beside him felt like reclaiming a piece of herself she had almost lost. The bride smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile, feeling the contrast between the false love she had almost accepted and the loyalty she now embraced. Her ex didn't promise a perfect future, but he offered sincerity, patience, and unwavering support, the kind of love that lasts beyond fleeting passion or deceit. In that quiet moment, she understood that betrayal had opened a door she might never have noticed otherwise, revealing the path to something real and lasting. Because sometimes, the heartbreak that destroys you is the door that saves you. She took a deep breath, letting the truth settle in her heart, knowing that she had survived, learned, and was ready to embrace the love she truly deserved. The scars remained, yes, but they were proof of her strength and of the life-changing lessons she now carried. A new beginning had arrived, quiet, profound, and full of promise, and for the first time in a long while, she felt truly free. In the end, the bride learned that betrayal is painful, but it also reveals who truly deserves your heart. Trust is fragile, but self-worth is stronger. She walked away from lies and chose a love that had waited for her in silence. What would you do if your bridesmaid betrayed you on your wedding day? Would you walk away, or would you forgive? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to uncover more shocking secrets behind every wedding.